Thanks very much again for Sally. We're starting again, for inviting me to speak. I joined several months ago and I found it very interesting with like-minded people. Supposed to move forward? No? Right, finally. A little bit information about my background. This is not an ego trip. My ego trip I do on a cruise ship a couple of times a year. Just to basically tell you my background. I became an eco-psychologist. I'll explain what it is in a moment. But as you can imagination provokes you to think, it's to do with ecology and psychology, and you marry the two together, and you got eco-psychologist. It's also called ecotherapy. I studied solar energy and energy audit. The gentleman here, who just arrived, Ivan, was my teacher at Navitron. And Peter here from Solar Base was my solar installer, and we're working together, the three of us. Energy audit, my background is similar to Paul here, project management, project engineering, that's my background, business analysis. Also studied naturopathic, holistic medicine, nutrition, homeopathy, herbal medicine. My other job, when I have time in between, is I do public speaking. I wrote 4 books, published quite a few papers, and I do other things also there. Right. Just to give you a little bit of background, where eco-psychology comes from, okay? It comes from the Hebrew Bible. The first 3 commandments that mankind was commanded about was about the environment. And Lord God said to man in the Garden of Eden that he has to work it and keep it. Genesis 2:15. So the commentators tell us that God said to Adam, just don't sit on your ass and enjoy the weather and the fruit and your wife. Do something. And he did. He actually had to pray for the first rain to come. The first rain, God showed him how to do it. And then the second rain, he had to actually create it. According to our tradition, when vegetation grew, it only grew to the level of the floor. The grass, just there, it didn't rise above it. And then when Adam prayed and rain came about, the material potential of the vegetation came to be, and it grew up. So that's green for you, okay? Secondly, it's enshrined in the Code of Jewish law not to destroy property, nature in particular. So for example, if you get a situation of war, and you lay siege on the city, you must not cut the fruit tree because it sustains life. Environmental preservation. The Talmud tells us that if you want to build a factory which has bad odor, in the old days they used to process leather using not the chemicals we use now, synthetic, they used other things like waste products from animals, and I can assure you the smell was very unpleasant. So the Talmud actually has a rule that so many kilometers and the wind direction and everything else, that's eco-psychology for you, right in the beginning. And also we are prohibited from destroying animals, fish and so on, and if we must hunt them for a living, we must somehow keep the balance in nature and replace it if possible. Very similar to what the Red Indians did with the buffalo when they wanted to hunt a little bit to live with, but not exterminate them like the pioneers did in America. Now, another term, Gaia and holistic universe. Gaia is a Greek goddess of Mother Earth. James Lovelock, one of the great innovators in the last few years, actually termed this name a few years back, and he called it the Gaia hypothesis. What he's saying basically is what we know now from science, proven, that if you touch the ecosystem, which is very, very complicated, if you destroy one or more types of species, be it grass, maybe plants, maybe animals, the food chain in nature is upset basically, and somebody is going to die as a result. Either plants are going to die, animals are going to die, birds or fish, because they are depending on one another for the food chain. So that was the idea by James Lovelock. And this is a parallel. We got a lady here with nutrition, and myself, of course, wearing the other hat. It's parallel to the human body. What happens with the human body? I'll give you an example. If somebody comes to me with a skin problem, I had a few skin problems myself, I treated myself successfully, thank God. And there are 2 types of skin problems. The type of skin problem from physical allergy and the fact that that person came in touch with harmful chemicals. This we have to treat physically. To get rid of the infection, give some herbs and other natural remedies will get rid of the infection from the inside, but also put something on the outside, some form of cream, not like cortisone or any other creams that cause side effects. But if that person happened to have skin problems because of stress and tension, which are usually associated with skin problems, we treat the stress, which is the cause of the skin. We might give something to treat the skin, but the main cause is internal. So we look at the personality. We do not disconnect the person, the psyche, the mind, body, and spirit from the body. Now, Professor Bill McGuire, why I bring him, why ecopsychology? Some people, of course, the cynics would claim that he's taken his license too far. He's a famous volcanologist. Volcans, eruptions, that's his expertise. But he moved on to climate change. And of course, there is a connection actually between the two. But be it as it may, it's not just Bill. I met him, a very interesting professor. I listened to his talks. I borrowed two of his pictures, and I gave an acknowledgement for that. And others. Actually, I'm very worried. They're talking about 7 to 10 years, and I got a slide talking about 20 years. Frankly, when it's 7 or 10 or 20, it's immaterial. The fact is we are, as Sally very aptly introduced to us the concept, we are on the 12th hour, basically, or on the 90th minute of a football game, if you like. So we got all these problems. By the way, it's not that far away. It's here in northern England and in Scotland. This year we had record rain. In the summer we had mudslides, we had roads blocked, people had to be evacuated, and the government plans to actually move communities away. We're talking really at our backwaters, right in our backyard. Now, fish is dying, Lake Chad is shrinking to half the size already. And that's evidence. The Gobi Desert, I got a nice picture later showing it's advancing in China. For me, it's a personal tragedy. I come from Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee, famous Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, is heavily polluted. It's several meters below the red line. Israel had to stop pumping water to irrigate the Negev, the desert, basically. There's water restriction in Israel. Only 1 hour a week they can water the garden, and the plants and the fruit are dying. It's a real tragic situation. I remember when I was a kid, it was a long time ago, several decades ago, when I was young and slimmer looking, I used to be able to drink the water while I was swimming. Now, if you do that, you're taking your health really into a risky area. You wouldn't like to do that today. You'll be ill. So to me, it's a personal tragedy. We're talking about the carbon dioxide and other pollutants in the air. 2007, about 387 parts per million, and it's moving up. Various estimates of 2 or 3 degrees plus, water level anywhere between 2 meters to 20 meters high, and sharp increase in diseases, malaria in particular, because of the climate change. So there are going to be horrendous consequences, not just for the environment, for us human beings. So what's in it for me, personally, what's in it for me is saving my life, saving my family, and I don't want to leave a legacy for my children and grandchildren that they will look back and say, what did dad or granddad did about it? What did he do about it? Did he actually take a proactive step? So for me, it's a personal issue here. It's not just a global issue, to bring it personally. So the GIGO principle, for those of us in computing, remember garbage in, garbage out, Newton's law, for every action there's a parallel and equal reaction. This is simulation of London, city of London underwater, as it may well be the case if we don't stop the advance of climate change. Again, more implications, 1 meter's rise, causing 1 billion people terrible tragedy. The agricultural land will be lost, the coastal areas are retreating, water is moving forward, coastal areas retreating, we're losing agricultural land. Actually, it will affect our life. In the summary, I'll bring a couple of other issues. Now, the Met Office, interesting point here. They put in the statistical model, of course, the cynics, I did statistics, I used to lecture about Monte Carlo simulation, what-if scenarios. They put 20% chance that we're going to hold the level of 400 parts per million, which is the threshold. 450 and above is going to be catastrophic. Maybe now it's 20%. I like to think it's more like 80%. and I talk about prevention of 2 degrees plus increase. Now, this I took from the Times, a paper for intelligent people. I only graded to the League of Intelligent People about a year ago when I was given a special offer, otherwise I never read the Times. I got the same problems for Ronald Reagan. When he was serious, people thought he was joking. When he was joking, people thought he was serious. I was actually serious about that. So, great. We were able to sail through the North Pole. Now, for somebody who goes on a lot of cruise ships, by the way, a lot of the photos you'll see later are not print, it's very boring. Some of the places I've been, some of the places I haven't been, and I would like to be. But anyway, so you've got to cut 3,000 miles between the Far East and Europe. Great if you're in shipping business. And tourists will be amazed because you can take them to all these places. They couldn't go before. However, it will be problematic because once the ice sheet is melting, the reflection of the ice, of sunlight, will disappear. The permafrost, which has double the carbon dioxide than any other soil, will also ooze to the surface. So we're going to create, not just the floodings and everything else I talked about before, we're actually going to accelerate carbon emission to the environment at a phenomenal rate. This is why the problem is so severe and will become more severe, because for those of you who learn science and engineering, this is no longer a linear line. This is exponential. We're going not at the same rate. Linear is same rate, constant. Exponential is like this. We are exponential at the moment. Okay, this is why it is so serious. Greenland, and by the way, I was in Alaska a couple of times, and I could see the ice melting in front of my very eyes. I could see it coming down into the ocean. Spectacular view. Right, don't know where it was taken from. Obviously it was in Europe rather than the US because smaller cars, as you can see that. So what is ecopsychology? Connecting ecology and nature. It is psychology, how we relate to nature. Society, a responsibility. And Theodore Roszak is the guy who invented it in 92 and 95 when he wrote the book Voice of the Earth, then the name ecopsychology. Now there's another aspect here. Just to dwell for a second on the psychology side, there are a lot of people who have disconnects from nature. People thought that we were born in concrete houses. The meat grows in the supermarket, actually. There's no holy cow grazing somewhere, or sheep, or whatever it is. And the fish grows in the pond somewhere, but it ain't. It's really in nature. Now, I was lucky enough when I was growing up, I actually came in touch with nature. And now we've been, for the last 8-9 years, cruising halfway around the world, in the Amazon, the South Pacific, and Caribbean, and Alaska and Hawaii, and quite a few places. So for me, nature is something personal, something I could see, something I could touch. So what we found that a lot of people with depression, stress, and anxiety issues, they've linked to the environment. They've taken groups of people to nature. Some hug a tree, some maybe were able to hug each other, I don't know. But they have found that people in nature, they feel much better. It's a natural reaction. When you go on a picnic, it's a nice day, you go out, you enjoy yourself, it's a wonderful reaction. You're feeling different when you're sitting in the office, right? We all know that. But they've taken it to the extent they actually claim it's therapeutic. Just like we use a painting therapy, or music therapy, styler therapy, all these forms of therapy where you dish out your anxieties on a canvas, or you can actually, there's a school, and there's a school up in Scotland, they take people with mental disorders, particularly Gulf stress syndrome soldiers from the First War and the Second War, and those ex-soldiers are actually planting bulbs and looking after trees, and those people are rehabilitated at a wonderful rate, wonderful fashion, and this is happening right now in Scotland. They want to expand it to southern England. This is actually a nice picture from the Rockies. I went to the Rocky Mountains a long time ago. That's not my photo, but that's one of them. So what we're going to do about the development, okay? The development is basically what Sally is doing, what I'm doing, what you're doing to increase the awareness of what's going on, to talk about it, do something. This is my place of birth, the Sea of Galilee, where I was thrown into the water. It's either swim or drown. Luckily, I learned to swim. And this Huatulco in Mexico, which is the most beautiful place of nature reserve and rainforest in Mexico. You don't have to go to the Amazon. You can see it in Costa Rica, in Mexico. So Rozak expanded the idea with ecopsychology. It's called many names, ecotherapy, look at a whole list of names. As part of my course, I studied his book. Now, just films. What we're talking about? What is the message? Right, Al Gore. Of course, the critics, there always be critics, like to pick up on specific points. The point is he was right about 80-90%. Who cares about the 10% of inaccuracy? The message is clear. There's a film, the DVD, End of Suburbia, Depletion, the Collapse of the American Dream. For them, it's going to be more profound than for us in Europe because they're used to the car economy. There's hardly any public transport anymore. We have a different problem. We have public transport, but it doesn't work, or it's very, very expensive. Except when you go to France or you go to Israel, where public transport is a fraction of the cost here, and it does work, and it's on time. Why you haven't got it together here, I don't know. Maybe it's part of the brains that we have here. Maybe they need brain surgery, never mind ecopsychology. What a way to go. It's another film. By the way, this is national flower of South Africa, can't remember the name, and Southern California, also grows in Florida and in Hawaii.
As well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know where the trees are. Now look at the contrast. This is where I've been, but I like to, spend time. And this is after Hurricane Katrina. Okay, they're just stupid. I don't know. Have you heard about this film? A UK film? I haven't seen it. I've seen the excerpts. But there's a guy looking back. Remember, I said in the introduction, 2050, looking back what he could have done, what he didn't do, in 2008. And believe it or not, we are getting there, slowly or surely. So what are the stages of reaction to climate change? We got denial. I can't do anything about it, she can't do anything about it. It's too much for us to deal with. Typical psychology terminology. Semi-consciousness, we're in a state of daze, we're not quite sure where we're going. Moment of realization, it hit us, that's it, we got to do something about it. Point of no return, we can't go back. We got to move forward now. But before we move, but immediately we realize what we've got to do to take some action, we got to despair, the guilt, the hopelessness, like what power do we have as individuals? That's why we need a body like ecopsychology and environmental population, similar organizations that work together. Because the politicians, as you know, they have problems not just with expenses, they have narrow channels in the brain that lead, the gray matter, like to think straight. They have to go in a convoluted route. But even they're getting the message. And acceptance, empowerment, action. This is what we're doing, action. We're talking about it, doing something about it. This is the iguana at my best friend's garden in southern Florida, where they have crocodiles in the river, so you be careful. It already ate one of the poodles of the guys next door. This is me, I think it was in Hawaii, one of the waterfalls, my Indiana Jones hat. I can't remember what it was, just I like the flower. Right, that's me feeding the kangaroo in Australia. That's one of the fish ponds with real fish, not artificial fish. So, according to ecopsychology, we got 53 senses, believe it or not. 4 groups: radiation senses, color, heat, etc. Feeling senses, wind, gravity. Chemical senses, hormonal senses like thirst, hunger. And the mental senses, depression, exuberance, and also reason. The reason is the most dangerous feeling or excuse, because in the name of reason we do all sorts of different things. We justify all different things of reason. Won't go through all the 53 in one go. So this is reason. This is, by the way, a real picture when we visited Alaska. It was awesome. This is, I think, the one in the North Passage between the Canadian, American, and the border of Alaska. Okay, one of the streams there. It was really awesome. I cannot just tell you how exciting and how breathtaking it was to be in those places. To me, Alaska and Hawaii and the Grand Canyon is probably the 3 most exciting places in the world I've been to, and I'm not finished yet. So, just to recap, it's really when people go to nature, they appreciate it. But you don't have to go to all these places. You can just come to Hertfordshire. We got some beautiful places around here, and I've been to some of them. So you can connect with nature. We're very fortunate here. We got beautiful stately homes. We got some nice gardens. My wife is a keen gardener, so wherever we can, we go to see gardens and gardening exhibitions. Not just Chelsea, we go further out. This is me blowing my trumpet, so to speak, the seashell horn. This guy taught me how to do that. We want to swim with the turtles, the sea turtles. I didn't bring my photo with the swimming with the dolphins because I only have a hard copy. They wouldn't let me have the electronic copy. I suppose I could scan it. That was in Barbados, by the way. Okay. Disconnect with nature. The reasons I mentioned before, why we're disconnected with nature and we don't appreciate nature. That's why we become unwell, physically and mentally, possibly. That's why it's important to go on holiday. The waterfall is in Grenada, the island of Grenada. And these are pink dolphins in the Amazon. Okay, they're not grey dolphins. By the way, when you ride on dolphins, it feels just like you're riding on a rubber tire, except this is alive and it makes some noise and it's exciting. But I didn't ride on those; it's too risky. Okay, they're wild. The ones they were tamed. They're in Mexico. That was a trip we did to the Mexican Riviera here in 2005. Right, watching your thoughts. Thoughts become words, words become pattern and habits and become action. So when we say to conquer nature, really nature's got the last laugh. Who are we to conquer nature? We can work with nature if we're clever, we can build our habitat around nature to fit into nature, but we cannot conquer nature. If you look at almost every attempt to conquer nature, nature kicks back. This is an example, bleeding the life. This is a particularly kauri gum, that's from Australia. They needed resins to make all different things for building purposes, art, you name it. Eventually, the trees were dying because they stabbed a knife into them, okay? And they had to stop it. Luckily, with technology, we have now synthetic stuff that does the same. So this is an example. I took it from the nature reserve where we went to. This was around the Blue Mountains, where you get blue in the face. Right. New Zealand, just like the picture, place we're doing the geysers, coming out, everything coming from the soil. You can boil an egg or you can cook something instantaneously. You can even cook your legs if you're not feet, if you're not careful enough. But this is really exciting. And every few minutes they come with a gush. I've not been to Yellowstone National Park, but it's similar, but it's spectacular, it really is. Right, that's me with the koala, or the koala and me, I should say. Why eucalyptus? The koala can only eat half a dozen types of eucalyptus. If the habitat of the koala goes, the koala might go also. So we could lose one of the most beautiful animals in the universe. And the koala can't change their diet like we can. So it's a problem. Try to teach the koala to change the diet. So it's important to have eucalyptus. I just homed at this point. Now, why eucalyptus live to the Blue Mountains? Why do you get blue in the face? You can see the colors, it's blue and green and so on. For years and years, all the experts tried to work out why the Blue Mountains have this bluish background. Until some clever cloak found out that when you shine sunlight through eucalyptus oil, then you get refraction and reflection, which results in predominantly blue light. Took years to get to this conclusion. Of course, we know from physics, we put light through a prism and it breaks down to the 6 or 7 primary colors. So this is the Blue Mountains, a place we visited. It's awesome. The only complaint I have against it, the mosquitoes and the flies in Australia are very, very stubborn. They don't go. That's why you got the cork there. And some people actually went on a visit with net over their head, because when these things, if they do bite you, it's not pleasant. So that's the only thing I have against the countryside. Not to mention the snakes and crocodiles and other things, but otherwise it's great. We don't have it in Hertfordshire, thank goodness for that. Solar ecology, well, I took all this time. Basically, the idea of solar ecology is to do with ecopsychology, because solar energy, whether it's for heating water, whether it's photovoltaic to generate electricity, or whether it's a heat pump, we have guys here in the business, wind energy, it's all to do with nature, with the sun, it's all to do with the solar reactions in outer space, and you can see the difference. I think this is a sunset in Barbados, which I took a picture of. I took a series of 6 pictures as the sun was going like this, one after the other. And that's the other sunshine, with the smoke coming out of it, or into it, I should say. Right, a few commandments. I'm not going to go through all of them, because we have another speaker. It's not fair to take a slot. Basically, we are one. Nature and humans are one. We got to work together. We got to stop deforestation. In the Times, there was a big insert with the Prince of Wales, Prince Charlie, my favorite. He speaks his mind out. So do I. The only difference, they take notice of what he says. Nobody takes notice of what I say. And there's a whole expose there on the rainforest. Toxic waste, avoid chemical products, severe temperatures, because it requires processes which take a lot of energy from nature. To minimize and then ultimately stop using fossil fuel, unless we find a way. There's still hope to find a fossil fuel that the reaction will be completely benign and recyclable, like hydrogen fuel. The byproduct is water. I know in Israel they work on some fuel, and it wouldn't surprise me if we make a breakthrough. Clean renewable energy should be maximized until basically it's 100%. Raw materials, again, should be from a recyclable source. New homes. Okay, well, we discussed it when we did the solar energy course. We really like to see new homes coming with default solar panels. We like to see homes coming with heat pumps if there's sufficient room for that, and certainly for big hotels and buildings, they can sink a borehole and get hot air or hot water that way. If the area has got wind, and after measurements, it transpires it's good for wind, so let's go with wind energy, whatever it is. Make it compulsory to use energy efficient light, like LED or CFL. I've done a project at home. Peter knows about it because I told him. We changed over 50 bulbs to CFL. Going to save something like 180, 200 pounds per annum on our lighting alone. Put curtains in places, put solar panels for hot water. And the government, of course, it needs to do much more. It's good giving us loans, but I want grants, not loans. I thought this is the punchline, really. I couldn't resist it. This is from my course I took in America on energy audit. I think it says it all. Thomas Edison conversation with Henry Ford and Harvey Firestone, you know, Firestone tires. Yeah. Listen to this. We're like tenant farmers chopping down the fence around our house for fuel when we should be using nature's inexhaustible source of energy, sun, wind, and tide. I put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. Now, don't blame him. He was too busy inventing other things, but we can blame ourselves. Just a few acknowledgement references. My teacher from California, Dr. Sarah Edwards from Pine Mountain Institute in California. Bill McGuire, I listened to him. I took some of his figures in this presentation. And Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they also make a lot of hot air. I can't pronounce this guy's surname. I'll just call him Professor Moran. Okay, it's the Sustainable Consumption Institute to do with Manchester University. I looked at his website, it looks pretty good. And the books I mentioned before, I highly recommend it. They are compulsory reading for me as part of the course. And I had to write long essays about them. It was quite tough, believe me. Yeah. I just want to finish off very quickly with some of the other issues that I picked up, which are not on the slide. The bees are dying in massive quantities. 30 to 40% of bee colonies in the US and UK have been destroyed. I saw a documentary. To bring a bee colony from another place, it means you bring in a truck with all the bees inside. It costs you tens of thousands of dollars or pounds to pollinate your fruit. Did you know that the vast majority of fruit need bee pollination? No bee pollination, no fruit. You go to the supermarket and it's going to be like in Zimbabwe. Nothing. Can't buy anything. There's nothing there to buy. What are you going to live on? Bread maybe if you're lucky. That's what we're talking about. Tragedy on a massive scale. We talked about the ice cap, the temperature increase. I'm going to repeat that. Just some more interesting statistics from the time before I conclude. It says 50% of CO2 emissions are generated by 7% of the world's richest population. Us. And the poorest 50% of the population generate only 7%. Is a good number, 7, 50, and 50 and 7, yeah. And the rest is in between. So food for thought for us guys. Now I'm going to put you on the spot in February because I'm not going to ask you now, but in February my next question is, have you been brainwashed by environmental population and everybody else you talk about? In February I'm going to ask people, how many of you have any renewable energy sources at home? But we're not going to do it today, so no embarrassment. And thank you very much again for asking me to speak today. And may the force be with us. We really need it.